Darkcast Network, bringing our indie podcasts out of the shadows.
Just before we dive into this week's episode, here's a promo.
Wait, so you like concerts, podcasts, and music, and you don't listen to Concerts That Made Us podcast? Oh man, you're missing out. You've got to head over there straight away. They have interviews with the best up-and-coming bands, as well as some famous ones thrown in the mix too. And don't even get me started on the concert stories. Oh man, are they wild. That's Concerts That Made Us podcast. New episodes every Thursday on all podcast players.
Hello and welcome to CrimeDivers. I'm Laura.
And I'm Jill.
And welcome back.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us once again, or if you're new here, welcome to our podcast.
Yes.
So today we have a lot-a-sode, so we're going to just get right into it. And what is the name of your episode?
It's called the Dunfermline Monster.
Oh, like Dunfermline as in near us?
Yes, so we are in
Oh.
Scotland.
We're in Scotland,
Yes,
yeah.
we are in Scotland.
So just
today.
for context, how many miles away is Dunfermline from us?
God, now you're asking.
Which one? Oh.
I don't actually know how far it is.
Right, okay, well, by car, you drive to Dunfermline. Our brother actually lives near Dunfermline, doesn't he?
Like,
So,
20, 25 miles? Is it more than that?
well, I'm saying time. Like, how long does it take to drive there?
About 45 minutes on a good day.
Well, there you go. I just want to put in context of how close this
Yes,
is to us.
this is a close one, which is why I liked the idea of this one, because I thought,
and
closer to home.
Why don't I know it then?
I don't know. Well, to be fair, I vaguely knew it. Like, I had, like, when I looked into it, I was like, oh, I do recognise the...
Oh, well, I might recognise names because I don't know any. I'm just saying I don't know it. I just haven't heard of the Dunfermline Monster. I might have heard the name. And I actually said to John last night, I was like, I'm looking forward to listening to Laura's episode because she's just told me the title. So I didn't know it was the Dunfermline Monster. And I was like, have you heard of the Dunfermline Monster? And he said no. So...
Well, maybe when you actually know who's about, you might, or you might not. But hey, I'm going to tell you the story.
It's
anyway.
amazing how many crimes kind of just go past you and you don't, like, near you and you don't even hear about them. So that's why I like to do a true crime podcast, because we get those crimes out there and, like, you let the victims have a voice and whatnot.
Exactly. Well, this is definitely the closest to home that I think I've done, because you've done a few close to
I
home
did one,
ones.
because for our listeners, Dunfermline is in a place called Fife, and I've done one in Fife. I did Alan Bryant missing.
Oh, yes.
He's still missing. So I did that one. That was in Fife as well. So that was...
Yeah.
I think that's the closest ones. No, I did an Edinburgh one.
We did the World's End murders.
Oh yeah, so we're just talking. But you haven't.
I
have you?
haven't. This is the closest to home I think I've done.
Because I did the World's End, which was Edinburgh and East Lothian.
And you did the girl that went missing in Portobello. She was snatched from Portobello.
All right, okay, we're just going to shut up because there's actually quite a few.
But I mean, listen, this is the first time that I've done one close to home. We'll just forget about you. Concentrate on me.
So much for me saying, right, we're just going to get right into it. Right,
I know.
Laura,
Yes.
would you like to dive in?
Let's dive in. So, this case takes us somewhere a bit closer to home. It's about a woman called Carol Taggart. She lived in Fife, Scotland, which is just over the bridge from where we are, near Edinburgh.
Can I just say something? There's been a murder. For anybody who doesn't know that reference, there's a TV programme
Called Taggart.
And I've never watched an episode of it in my life.
Me neither.
It's a police thing,
Drama,
drama thing.
yeah,
But all I know about the guy is called Taggart,
Uh-huh.
and he goes, "There's been a murder,"
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
So that's why I'm saying it. I just had to get that out.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Shall we get back to this now?
Yeah.
Cool. Right. So when Carol was a young girl, she was described as a very bright, bubbly little girl. She loved to sing and dance and was always in good spirits. And as she grew up into a teenager and into a young woman, she was always the same, just a big, bright bundle of energy. She was very sociable and described as the life of the party. People had nothing but nice things to say about Carol. She loved a night out with her girlfriends. Carol didn't really drink that much, but, you know, she was very much like the mum friend. You know, she looked after everybody else. And apparently she liked playing that role within her friendship group, so she was quite happy to be the mum of the group. So.
I would have loved one of them. When I had that, we were all just as bad as each other.
No,
It was like the blind leading the blind.
you know, she was the one who looked after everybody. So when she was in her late teens, early 20s, Carol met a man that she completely fell head over heels for. They got married fairly quickly, but I don't actually know his name.
Right.
So
It's
all I
her
know is
husband.
it's Carol's husband.
Right.
So they had 2 children together, 2 boys. Same with the husband. We don't really know much about the older son because again he didn't.
Because he doesn't really feature.
Well, he does feature. Well, it doesn't really feature much, but he just didn't like. For this case, he didn't really want to be known, so he sort of kept himself anonymous, basically. But she had an older son, and then she had our younger son who was called Ross. They were such a happy little family to start with, but as time went on, cracks started to show in Carol and her husband's relationship, so that eventually led for them to go through a divorce. So Carol, she all of a sudden found herself a single mother of 2 young boys. Ross was still a baby and the older brother was a toddler. But she got herself a job as a childminder to provide for them. I'm starting to be you.
Why is it every time you make a mistake you say you're like me?
I know, because I don't know, because you do it more than me. Well, let me start again. So she got herself a job as a childminder to provide for them. Carol and the boys, they moved out of the family home, obviously, and moved into their own homes. Carol was, she was so strong. She was just a machine.
Mm-hmm.
She was looking after the boys. She was trying to hold down a job, just basically doing everything on her own. And everyone always said, what an amazing mum that she actually was. And as much as Carol was bossing it on her own, she longed for somebody. She wanted.
You're gonna get lonely, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. She wanted, a boyfriend, a companion, just someone to share her life with. So in 1986, she met someone new, and it was around Christmas time when she met a man called Sean Taggart. So obviously she wasn't Carol Taggart at that point.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, I mean she is known as Carol Taggart, but she wasn't actually known as Carol Taggart.
Until she got, so that's her married name,
yeah,
right?
So so she met Sean Taggart, and he was funny, he was kind, caring, and social. In her eyes, the perfect man for her. So he got on well with her 2 sons as well, which is obviously important. They were 4 and 18 months when she met Sean. And he really stepped up, he treated the boys like his own, and they started calling him dad, so, it seemed like everything was going great. So they moved to a town called Dunfermline, and after living there for 2 years, Carol and Sean welcomed their own child together. This time it was a girl, and they called her Lorraine. So their little family was complete now.
Yeah.
So Carol, she decided, Carol and Sean decided to buy a little static caravan about 10-15 minutes, which I found bizarre. I mean, maybe people do this, I don't know, but they decided to buy a little static caravan, which is about 10 or 15 minutes from where they lived, which was it was closer to the seaside, but it was like a little holiday home for them, and I thought, 10-15 minutes from where you lived, you bought a holiday home. I mean...
Well, I'm not judging, well I am.
I just thought...
You can just drive.
I just thought, if that was me, I would... I'm all
You'd go a bit further afield,
I would go a bit further afield than just 10-15 minutes.
Yeah.
But, it was closer to the seaside, so it made them happy, so...
We're not judging.
Yeah, exactly. Fair enough. So they had this little holiday. So Sean and Carol, after that, they decided to get married, and then Carol and her 2 boys took Sean's surname, so they all became Taggarts.
They're all Taggarts.
So, from the outside, everyone thought they were such a perfect little family, but little did anyone know that the Taggart family were dealing with a few issues, which mainly related to Carol's mental health. So after the birth of Lorraine, Carol was actually diagnosed with postnatal depression. And it was so tough for her. She was on medication, but she still very much struggled, day to day. And the medication, it didn't really do much to help her at all. She didn't have a lot of energy, but the one thing that did keep that light in her life was her family. That kept her going. So depression, it didn't stop her from spending fun times playing with her kids. She was still being an incredible mother, and no matter what she was dealing with on the inside, she was still trying her best.
Yeah.
But of all the kids, it was the middle child, Ross, who was the handful for her. He was the cheeky one. He was always the one that was pushing her buttons. It was never too serious. He wasn't a bad child. But, he was the loudest of all the 3 of them. He was the leader of the pack.
This just sounds...
I was middle child.
This just sounds familiar because I'm the middle child, and I'm just yeah, that sounds like me. I was the one that was cheeky. I was the one that was the kind of troublemaker. Yeah. I was the loud one, still am.
Yeah, that's not changed, that's for sure. But yeah, so let's say, he was the loudest of 3, he was leading the pack, and as the kids grew up into teenagers, he was always the dominant one.
Right, yeah.
So as they got older, Carol found herself feeling upset as she just felt they were just growing up too quick. And, you know, they'd been quite a focus for her, you know, as well as dealing with depression. You know, the kids were the sort of...
It sounds like she was sort of like living for her kids, basically. Like they were, you know, her life revolved around them, and family was everything. And...
Exactly, and she, you know, she felt like she wasn't spending enough time with them, so she actually decided to quit her job as a childminder that she was doing elsewhere. So, but she decided to do her own childminder business from home. So she was obviously childminding elsewhere, but she decided to do it from her own house.
Like our mum did that. She used to be a childminder in our house.
Oh, there you
Right,
go.
oh God. Well, there's no any more similarities in this story.
Yeah. But sadly, around this time, Carol's ex-husband, so not Sean,
the first one,
the first husband, the father of her 2 boys, he actually passed away.
Oh.
And obviously it hit the boys like so hard.
Had they still been having a relationship with him?
Yeah,
right.
As far as I know. I haven't seen anything to say a difference. So I assume they had been having a, you know, some kind of relationship with them. But let's say it hit them really, really hard, and neither of them knew, you know, how to deal with their grief.
Right.
You know, they didn't really get any help, so it started coming out in other ways. You know, they started acting up, like getting in trouble at school, and Carol knew that they were just sad.
Yeah.
But it didn't make it any easier, and she just didn't really know how to help her sons either, to be honest. You know, and then they began acting up for Sean because, you know, he wasn't their real dad.
Yeah.
You know, the boys, you know, they were just in a lot of pain, and it just wasn't an ideal family situation. So, you know, you would think over time that things would get better, but sadly it just got worse.
Oh, no.
As, you know, as they got older, their bad behaviour turned into them committing crimes. You know, they would vandalise things, they would steal money from their parents. And again, you know, Carol knew they were just sad, but she felt like she couldn't parent them anymore. So she stopped telling them off. And that led to a lot of issues in the household. So, you know, the boys would get away with stuff while Lorraine would get punished.
Right, yeah.
And it, you know, it caused loads of arguments. You know, like, Carol would buy the boys presents to try and make up for their sadness, but she wouldn't get in for Lorraine's. So, you know, it wasn't great. And eventually, much to the family's relief, the older son, he actually started to grow out of his behaviour.
Mm-hmm.
So he, you know, he dealt with his grief a bit better. But Ross, he just wasn't dealing with it at all. You know, he just got worse and worse. You know, Ross, he was still stealing money from his parents, but Carol didn't want to, you know, Carol didn't want to say anything to him. But Sean got to the point where he'd had enough.
Right.
Like, he was like, you know...
That's understandable.
Yeah, and he basically was like, I'm going to bring it up to Ross whether Carol liked it or not.
Right, yeah.
Basically. So, you know, it didn't go well.
I was just going to say, I bet that didn't go down too well.
Carol actually sided with Ross on that, so she sided with her son, and she basically had a go at Sean, for bringing it up with him. She fell out with Sean and went over to Ross and, like, started hugging him, began, you know, saying sorry on Sean's behalf. She was just so desperate to smooth things over that I think that's where Ross had the realisation that he could basically get away with anything.
He could get away with anything, yeah.
Yeah. So, of course, Ross, you know, he continued to steal, but I think he stopped stealing because obviously he'd been caught stealing from Sean's wallet, so that's when Sean came ahead with it.
Well, you can't blame him for...
Exactly, but obviously Ross continued to steal, but I think at this point he'd actually stopped stealing directly from Sean's wallet, but he was still 100% stealing from whatever he could get it. But by now, you know, the kids, they were getting older. Lorraine was in her late teens, and she was doing a lot of, like, dance competitions and stuff that she needed her mum to take her to. And Ross, he took issue with that. He didn't like the fact that his mum was away with Lorraine. And to be fair, I mean, Carol herself didn't really like it, as she felt like she was abandoning her son at home. So, you know.
Okay.
And Carol felt that bad that each time she went away, she would bring him back a gift, almost like a sorry for being away. And after a while, of course, Ross, you know, he grew to expect these gifts.
Right, yeah.
And Sean, he hated what Carol was doing.
Yeah.
Ross was still stealing, and basically he was becoming, you know, obviously in his teens into a bad man. He was growing up to be a bad man.
Well, it's like he's been rewarded for bad behaviour.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And it was all because he'd lost his dad, but Carol didn't really want to, like, punish him anymore because she felt he was so sad from losing his dad that she couldn't. So Sean, you know, Sean knew that they needed to do something, otherwise he was always going to be bad.
Mm-hmm.
So Sean actually suggested that Ross get a part-time job, and actually Ross was quite up for that, to be fair. So he got a job got a job by Edinburgh Castle. So I'm not sure what the shop was called, but it was a shop by Edinburgh Castle. And Ross really enjoyed it. And, you know, it looked like it was going to be beneficial to him. It was giving him a structure, a routine. But it didn't last long, as Ross was so used to stealing that he began stealing from his work.
I knew that was coming.
I'm not sure if it was money or merchandise.
Right.
But the shop...
It doesn't matter, does it?
Yeah, exactly. He was still stealing. But the shop very quickly found out. So Ross was pulled into the manager's office and sacked on the spot, basically.
Fair enough.
So Ross had to go back home and tell his parents that he had lost his job. But rather than tell the truth, he lied. And said his co-worker had been stealing but had framed Ross for it. And, you know, Carol believed him. She always did.
I was just going to say, I bet they didn't believe him. I bet Sean didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Well, as I was saying, she always did. Sean just knew it was Ross.
Yeah.
But he didn't even bother to say that to Carol because he just thought, you know what's the point? It's just going to fall on deaf ears. She believes that it wasn't him.
I feel sorry for him because that must be hard to just live there and watch that happening, like, you know, and not being able to do anything about it.
Exactly. So, you know, Carol helped Ross find another job. He was quickly fired.
Yeah.
Helped him find a third. Fired.
And was this for stealing?
I don't know the why he was fired, but he just couldn't hold down a job, basically. Okay. So, you know, third job fired, fourth job fired. Always the employer's fault, though. Never Ross's fault.
Right, yeah. You know, not taking responsibility for anything.
So I don't know, like, the ins and outs of exactly why he was fired from those jobs, but he just, you know, it wasn't his fault, whatever the reason. So, you know, Carol, she would always give him money in between jobs as well. So Ross, you know, took advantage of his mum, and he would actually sit at home pretending to look for a job while she continued to give him money. Mm. So the rest of the family all saw Ross for, you know, what he was, but Carol just could not see it, couldn't see it. Ross, you know, he could do no wrong, basically. And eventually more cracks showed in the family, and everyone apart from Carol just couldn't take it anymore. So the eldest son moved out and cut contact with the family.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know. Even Sean, he'd had enough as well, so he had to leave, and him and Carol actually got divorced. And it was all because of Ross.
Yeah.
And Lorraine, she didn't feel comfortable in her own home either, but she was still at home, but she just didn't feel comfortable.
She probably like stayed out as much as possible at her friends' houses and things like that, probably.
Yeah. Although it didn't last long, because eventually things did come to a head. And one night, Lorraine and Ross had both been on nights out separately, obviously not together, but they'd arrived home around the same time. And all of a sudden, like, Carol heard some commotion coming from upstairs in one of the bedrooms, and she ran in to the bed. I think it was Lorraine's bedroom, and she basically found Lorraine huddled in her duvet, just being punched over and over by Ross as he was screaming, "You think you have it all, don't you?" But
that's awful.
Carol just stood there watching it happen. She didn't do anything. She did nothing. I mean, I don't know. It's a difficult situation.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't say like should she have got involved or not, but she just stood there. She watched it all happen. I think, you know, Lorraine was kind of looking at her as if to say, "Mum,
help
do
me."
Something.
Yeah.
So after it all calmed down, Lorraine, she knew she was done.
Yeah, I'm not
like
surprised.
she just didn't want anything to do with him, so she actually moved in with her then boyfriend, now husband, Stephen. So Ross, he had his bum all to himself at this point. You know, with no one to call out on his behaviour, you know, he just got worse. And
yeah, because it's just the two of them now, isn't it?
Exactly. And, you know, Ross was, you know, he's now in his mid-20s, and his mum was still doing everything for him. You know, Carol was still giving Ross money, and she even trusted him enough that she gave him her bank card to go and get money at the cash machine. And of course, he took advantage of that, and he was taking out like stupid amounts of money. But his mum, you know, she never checked her bank statements, so she obviously. Well, yeah, she basically didn't know.
She didn't realise how he was taking all this money.
So he knew he could get away with it. Like, I mean, obviously she was knowing that he was getting money, but she just didn't know how much because she wasn't checking her bank account. I mean, she was obviously making enough money that she didn't need to, I guess. But
yeah, you would think though that you would just, I don't know, like. I've gave my daughter my bank card before, and but I would still be checking to make sure, no matter how much I trust her.
Like, I want a receipt or you know, whatever. You know, like, I wouldn't be that like. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, to me that's just a natural thing. Like, right, you've got my bank card, so I want to see. I mean, like, I can remember once, you know, she decided that she was going on an internet site and she was going shopping on it using my flipping bank card, and I'm like, right, okay, you can stop now.
Yeah, like, no, thank you, no. So yeah, so, you know, he basically, like, saves taking away getting out stupid amounts of money. So just during this time, you know, Carol and Lorraine, they'd actually started to meet up once every couple of weeks for a coffee, you know, because obviously they're still in touch. She hadn't necessarily fallen out with her mum, she just couldn't take it living
with him,
But of course Ross got jealous. He hated these meetings. Like, he did not want to share his mum at all. He wanted her all to himself. And he would actually say to Carol, like, he didn't like it and he didn't want her to go and meet up with Lorraine, and he actually asked her to stop seeing her.
My God.
But Carol, you know, it's like she didn't know what to do. She never said no to Ross.
But that's her daughter.
Exactly, but this was the first time that she, of course, didn't want to bow down and say yes, because she wanted to see her daughter
Yeah,
first.
of course she
Like,
did,
she
yeah.
wanted to see Lorraine, you know. But it got that bad that Lorraine and Carol actually started planning their meetings in secret so that Ross wouldn't find out.
That's awful.
I know, but I mean, it didn't work too well, as he often would find out anyway, and he would actually turn up and he would force his mum to leave, and she would literally just stand up and go with him. Like, so, you know, that's like, just say me and you were having a coffee and somebody's coming and saying, right, that's it, move, you're off, you know, and she did. She just bowed down to him.
She was obviously just for an easy life kind of thing. Like, it's just easier to go with him rather than, like, causing a fuss.
Well, exactly, and I mean, that's just awful.
Because he probably would have kicked off in public as well, and how embarrassing would that be?
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know?
So I think she just thought, don't want the drama, don't
Yeah.
want the hassle, just got up and went. So a couple of years, you know, kind of went by, and Lorraine and Stephen, they got married. And people commented on how weirdly close Carol and Ross were at the wedding. Like, he just would not leave her alone the whole time. Like, he was in every conversation that she was in. She just basically couldn't speak to anyone without him being involved in that conversation. And people thought, you know, that's a bit weird. Cause,
he sounds like a possessive partner, doesn't he?
well, exactly. I mean, that's her son.
I know.
It's weird,
like,
isn't it?
I mean, it's not right in any shape or form, like, with any relationship, but you would understand it more, like, if it was a partner. I mean, it's still not right.
Yeah, I think it's more commonly it happens with partners, and, like,
Yeah.
you wouldn't expect it.
It shouldn't be.
Well, it shouldn't be. But
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. No, you just
yeah.
you just don't expect that from somebody's child.
Exactly.
You would, as I said, you would expect it more from a partner,
Totally. So,
but not a child. Well, I know he's not a child, but
yeah.
a son,
I know what you
should
mean.
I say? Yeah. Because I'm taking by this point he's in his 20s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, he shouldn't really be glued to his mum's hip, should he? You know, I mean, she should be able to have a conversation and him not be around. But no. So as the years went by, you know, Carol became more and more, like, socially isolated. And bear in mind, she was kind of like the soul of the party, and everybody, like, loved her, and she's now becoming quite isolated. And you know, Ross would just not let her do most things.
So was she not, like, she wasn't going out with her friends
Not
and
really,
all
no.
that stuff?
But she was still doing her, like, her childminding business
Yeah.
and stuff like that. So she still.
Well, of course, she'd have to bring in
Yeah.
the money so that he can get her money.
Exactly. I mean, obviously that was at her house, so I mean, she would see the staff and stuff, because she employed. I think she did employ some staff as well.
Right.
So, like, you know, she would see people.
She must be
but,
doing all right.
yeah. Well, I mean, the picture. To be honest, I mean, I've seen a picture of her house.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's a nice house,
Yeah.
and you can see sort of where they've got the bit for the childminding part and stuff. So,
Right.
and I mean, obviously they did have the caravan, so I mean, they did have
Yeah.
somebody.
And of course, like, for him, he is going to be fine with that, because for one thing, she's at home. For another thing, she's working with children. So, and
Yeah.
she's bringing in money.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's different to going out, isn't it?
Exactly.
When she goes out, she might find another partner she's going to bring home, and he's going to be out of the
And he's
picture.
not
You
gonna
know.
want that. You know, he's got his mummy himself.
Exactly.
So yeah, so let's say Ross, you know, he just you know, he wouldn't let her do most things. She couldn't go and see people because Ross didn't want her to, and it, you know, it just made her depression worse. Like, I don't think she really ever got over her postnatal depression, and that just turned into, like, normal depression.
Oh.
And you know, she was put on more antidepressants around this time to help her deal with it, but that just ended up being one more thing that Ross could control. So he would decide when she would take her medication.
Oh no.
He would be the one to go and pick it up, and you know, she actually literally knew nothing about her own medication, because she was just trusting Ross with that. You know, he was like, I'll pick it up for you, like, you need to take it now. You know, he was basically dictating that to her, and she just was like, all right, okay, and just went
That's
on with
not
it.
right.
Exactly.
She's perfectly capable, you know. Fair enough, when, you know, elderly or whatever, you know, they have to give their, you know,
Right.
they might forget or whatever, but
I'm pretty sure she didn't need her 20-odd-year-old son
something to give her medication. No.
Exactly. I mean, because she was in her 50s. I mean,
Yeah.
it wasn't like she was, like, super old either.
No.
So,
She was perfectly capable.
exactly. So it started, you know, to make her sense of reality, like, warped. You know, she couldn't, like, she thought that Ross was the good thing about her life.
Right.
Like, you know, he was the light in such a miserable world. Like, she couldn't see it at the time, but the reason her life wasn't great
Was because of
Ross.
him, but he was seeing her as,
Yeah.
I'm living in a miserable world, but I've got my son to help me.
Yeah.
Like, my son's
He
my
basically-
shining light.
Yeah, I mean, he basically brainwashed her into needing him. So when Ross was about 25, 26, he got another job working for Amazon. It was just a regular 9 to 5 job. He'd be home most evenings to have dinner with his mum and tell her all about his day. And, you know, Carol was so proud of him.
Yeah.
But however, that turned out to be another one of Ross's lies. There was no job at Amazon. He was still unemployed, so every morning he would leave the house and go to their caravan and just chill there all day. Which I did think, like, when I started reading it, I'm like, Amazon 9 till 5? That doesn't sound
I did
right.
kind of wonder that as well when you said it.
Because, I mean, there's a big Amazon warehouse in Dunfermline, and I'm pretty sure their hours probably aren't 9 till 5.
No. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if there's shifts,
maybe, but I just...
But yeah.
It sounds a bit...
When I think 9 till 5, like, I just think... I don't know, I just think, like... I was actually thinking, like, an office job or something.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't specify... there was no job, but he didn't specify what he did in that.
Right.
Anyway. So basically he just went to the caravan to chill all day. So, but by this point, Lorraine had actually started to distance herself from her mum. She didn't really want to, but she just couldn't take Ross interfering anymore.
Yeah.
But Carol couldn't understand why. And, you know, Lorraine tried explaining what Ross was doing, but Carol would just get defensive on it. Like, she just obviously couldn't see that. And Carol, you know, she just thought that her daughter was abandoning her.
Oh.
You know, she was angry, upset, so much so... I mean, she must have been angry because this is unbelievable, but she was that angry that she actually went straight home after, it must have been a meeting with her daughter, and she actually started making changes to her will. And she cut Lorraine out of it completely, as well as her older son, so the sole beneficiary of her whole estate was going to... Ross. So I don't know, I mean, that fallout must have been pretty...
It must have
mental
been.
for her to actually go home. I mean, because people have fallouts and arguments and stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily go home and go, right, I'm changing my will.
Yeah.
But she obviously felt that strongly about it, that, you know, she was, you know, she did. So Carol said she did it, quote, in consideration of the fact that Ross has stayed with me and supported me, and in doing so given up a large part of his freedom, end quote.
Yeah, she's, as we've said before, she's seeing him as he's her world.
Mm-hmm.
And if, you know, Lorraine and the other son are, like, they've distanced themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's seeing that as abandonment, isn't she?
She has totally seen it because she's been totally brainwashed and thinking, you know, that's what's happened, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand, like, maybe why she's...
It's just sad. It really is. It's just sad.
So in 2013, Ross turned 30. And his mum paid for them to go to New York City.
Oh, nice.
Ross posted over 400 photos.
Wow.
Probably just to rub it in his family's faces, because apparently the account that he posted to, like, literally, I think it was only his family that were actually, sort of followers on it. So I think it was just to sort of rub it into their faces, to be honest. But Lorraine noticed in some of the pictures that Carol looked like that she lost weight. You know, she was looking quite frail in her eyes. And Lorraine, you know, she tried to get in touch with her mum, but once they were home, like, Ross had blocked any visitors from coming around the house.
Oh.
But in 2014, Carol finally started to realise how Ross was treating her. So she did, you know, she did have a light bulb moment where I think she did sort of start to realise. And it was like the light had come on, and she just could start to see things for what they were, and realised the reason everyone had left her was because of Ross. And she wanted to know to what extent that he'd been taking advantage of her. So finally, after years, she decided to check her bank statements, and that's when she saw all the large amounts of money that Ross had been taking.
Wow.
And also she decided she wanted to know more about his Amazon job, so Carol started to follow him, and of course she found out that he was going to the caravan.
Yeah.
So finally, that night, when they were both at home, Carol actually confronted Ross about the way that he'd been treating her for years. And, you know, Ross, of course, was flipped.
I was going to say, well, he obviously wasn't going to be very happy.
No, he flipped and he got angry. Carol did actually expect that, and she pretty much just let him shout. And once he'd finished, she told him that he could move out and that they should be living separate lives from this point on. And in the heat of the moment, Ross said, fine, I'll do it, I'll move out. But of course, after a few days when things had settled, Ross wasn't making any effort to move out.
Right.
And it was like it was completely forgotten that he'd said that he would move out, and life just carried on as it had, because she also just didn't push that.
She wasn't pushing it.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of fighting back there from her. And you know, they had obviously that was at some point in the year. They had another argument in the December that year, and she'd say that if he didn't move out, she would remove him from his will, and she sent him
Her will.
from her will, and she actually sent him a text which said, quote, "Apart from feed me, you do fuck all. You're nothing but a sponger to me, Ross."
Oh, wow.
End quote. So again, she's starting to, sort of realise
She's seen the light.
Absolutely. So on the 22nd of December, Carol actually failed to turn up for work.
Uh-oh.
So as I said earlier, she had a daycare centre, child minding service in her home. But obviously she didn't turn up for work, but she wasn't home either. So obviously, so she didn't come to the, I think, like...
To the bit where they had the child minding.
Yeah, she hadn't turned up there, but she actually wasn't home either. So where was she?
Where was she?
That's the question. But no one seemed to do anything at first. Like, no one really went looking for her. No one seemed overly concerned that day. But the next day came, and again, Carol didn't show up for work. And now her staff were worried. But Ross didn't seem to care that his mum wasn't there.
Okay.
So the staff had actually urged Ross to call the police and report his mum missing, as it wasn't looking like he was going to do that. So Ross did call for help, but he didn't call the normal police line. He called the non-emergency number in the UK, which is 101. Yeah. Because obviously our emergency number is 999. But he didn't think that it was an emergency, so he phoned the non-urgent line. And it was like he just didn't deem his mum's disappearance important enough to call 999. So he gave the operator all his mum's information, and then he said, quote, "We had an argument. She's been a bit depressive, and the problem is she had the doctor in last week, and she even told the doctor she was feeling like she didn't want to be here anymore." End quote.
Oh, okay. So he's setting it up that she's went and done something to herself.
Basically, so Ross, he was very calm on the phone, like too calm for what he's just said. It doesn't seem like he cared even like what he was just saying. So the 101 operator, of course, deemed this an emergency. She passed it on, and it was made a tier 3 missing persons inquiry, which is the most serious and highest tier for missing persons in the UK. Police, because I think that's worried in case she's going to self-harm herself. Because obviously the way that Ross described that is like she's depressed, she might do something to herself. So of course when somebody's missing in that potential state, that's like the worst. Yeah. So police got to work quickly as they needed to find Carol because was she likely to hurt herself potentially? That was the case. So that night Ross called Lorraine to tell her that her mum was missing, and immediately she was suspicious of her brother, and she later said, quote, "Immediately in my gut I knew he'd done something and that he was lying," end quote. So police thought maybe Carol was trying to get away from Ross, as they knew that they had that argument that he'd said, and she had tried to get him to move out, so maybe she thought, fine, I'm going then, if you're not going to move out, like, I'm going. Yeah. But her family rubbished that theory, as they just knew that Ross had something to do with it. So police started at Carol's house looking for any clues which might shed light on where she could be. They turned the whole house upside down, but there was just nothing. And police were then made aware of the caravan. All right. So obviously a few officers headed up there, but they didn't find Carol there or any signs that she had been. Right. So the family were so worried, as it was actually 2 days before Christmas. She'd obviously that's when she'd been missing. But Ross, he just seemed normal. He went on nights out to the pub. Over the Christmas period, he was in the pub all the time. And remember, his mum's supposed to be at risk of suicide, and he's out there in the pub. And
alarm bells would be ringing.
But he was loving it because people were like, I think obviously the community must have been aware of what was going on because.
Don't tell me they were buying him drinks and feeling sorry for him.
Yeah, they were. Oh. They were buying him drinks. They were feeling sorry for him. He was lapping it up. He was like, this is great.
I don't mean that nasty towards the people. I'm saying to him, and he was loving it.
Yeah, basically. So at 8 a.m. on Christmas morning, there was a knock on the door because Lorraine was actually spending Christmas with her husband and her dad. So they knocked on the door, and 2 police officers were there, and they delivered the news that they'd come across Carol's car. So Carol's car had been abandoned on the other side of town, and inside they found her handbag in the boot, which was odd, because Carol always kept her handbag in the same place in her car for decades. Lorraine said that when she got in the car with her handbag, so just imagine you're getting in the car, and every time she gets in the car, so I suppose driver's side, like when I'm sitting now, she would take her handbag off. She'd still have her handbag on. Lorraine said she'd take it off, and she would put it behind the passenger side for easy for her to get to. So that's what. So Lorraine.
Well, but even for anybody, I would find that very unusual to put their handbag in the boot.
Well, I never put mine in the boot.
Well,
Mine
exactly.
either goes behind me, or if I've not got anybody in the car, sometimes I'll put it down beside me on the passenger.
On the passenger side, yeah. That's. I mean, I would find that really weird for somebody to put their handbag in the boot.
Yeah, but let's say, Lorraine said she always got in the car with the handbag on her shoulder. She took it off, put it in her opposite seat. She would never leave it in the boot.
Yeah.
So police began to wonder, had she put the car there herself? Like, had she driven the car there and left it there? So on the 28th of December, Ross wrote a Facebook post thanking everyone for their help in his mum's disappearance, and he said in his post, quote, "We'd just like to thank everyone for their support this week and keep sharing the police posts. Hopefully my mum will turn up," end quote. So on the 30th of December, Carol had now been missing just over a week, and police were now about to get their next big development. They received a phone call from the owner of a local pawn shop, and he told police that Ross Taggart had been in his shop trying to sell his mum's jewellery. The police were confused, as they were actually quite hopeful that they could find Carol. So why is Ross getting rid of her jewellery? Like, she's never coming back. Like, to me, that's like he knows she's not coming back. So he obviously wants the money. So,
because I mean, if they're the police, their immediate thought is not going to be, "Oh, this son has done something to his mum." They are going to be thinking, "Oh, she's thinking of maybe hurting herself, so she's kind of took off."
Well, exactly.
So I'm sure they were searching for her, thinking that she was maybe going to still be alive.
Exactly.
But yeah, for him to be pawning the jewellery, it's like,
Yeah, so they told Lorraine, and she was like, that's proof that Ross had something to do with it, with Carol's disappearance. Because what police didn't know was that the jewellery that Ross was trying to sell was a watch and a ring that his mum wore every single day, and she she never took the ring off. Obviously, she might have taken the watch off at night or whatever, but she never took that ring off. So to me, I'm like, well, that's a bit stupid, isn't it? Like, I mean, if you were going to sell jewellery, would you not maybe go into a jewellery box and get something that maybe wasn't something that somebody wore every day? Because that's, to me, obvious.
Yeah,
like,
of course, if somebody wears that jewellery every day, then it's going to look suspicious if you're trying to sell it.
So, actually, at this point, this is the first time that police actually started to consider Ross as a suspect.
Right.
And they started to look at things through his eyes, and that's when things start to pop up. Like, for instance, when they found the car, the car seat was all the way back. So, the driver's sort of seat.
So it would be somebody taller than her, basically.
So basically, Carol was she wasn't particularly, I don't know what height she was, but she wasn't particularly
she
tall.
was smaller than...
Yeah, so basically her seat, if she'd been driving, would have been a lot further forward than actually it was. But at the time, the police didn't think anything of that, I think, at the time. But then...
Well, because it depends what police are looking for.
Well, exactly.
If they're not looking for signs of, what's the word? Foul play, then...
Exactly, they've not initially sort of saw that as something that's, important.
Yeah.
So this meant, that the last person to drive the car was someone much taller than Carol.
Yeah.
So police actually recovered a sat-nav, and on the day that Carol disappeared, it had been used to go to a random address, and the police actually went to this address, where a woman answered, but she was like, "I don't know a Carol Taggart," but she knew Ross.
Oh, right.
Apparently she had met him on a dating site, and Ross had taken her on her date, and she confirmed that Ross had stayed at her house the night of the 22nd. Bear in mind, Carol had went missing from the 22nd. So he'd stayed at hers that night. So Ross had been the last person to use the car. But why did he abandon it? Like, why hadn't he just driven home?
Exactly, yeah.
That makes no sense. So it now turned from a missing persons inquiry into a murder inquiry. I mean, alright, they haven't found Carol, but they obviously deemed the evidence enough that they now think that she's a murder victim.
Okay.
And Ross is now
the
prime suspect, and they believe that Ross had murdered his mum. So the police got 24 hours to search Carol's house again, but again they found nothing. So again they turned to the caravan, but this time it was different from the first time that they looked in it. It had been deep cleaned and smell of bleach.
Yeah,
in the air.
As soon as you smell the bleach.
So they got out the famous luminol and they sprayed the whole caravan.
Right.
And guess what? It glowed blue.
I was going to say it was covered.
It glowed blue. For anybody that doesn't know what luminol is, that's what you can detect blood with.
Yeah.
If it's been cleaned.
If it's not visible.
If you don't see and it's been cleaned, you can use luminol and that shows up.
Yeah.
Blood. So it was glowing blue. So this confirmed to police that Carol was dead, and that Ross definitely had something to do with it, and that the caravan was the scene of the murder.
Right, yeah.
So they sealed off the caravan park and they searched it. But at first they couldn't find anything. But then they noticed, I don't know if all caravans have, probably don't all have this, but a lot of caravans have like their own sort of like a wooden structure that can maybe be like a ramp to go up there, that, but it's like what sort of on a wooden base. So at first, but then they noticed all the caravans, they were built on this wooden support, and all the caravans had a door in the wooden part.
Right, okay.
So they decided to look under Carol's caravan, but there was nothing.
Oh.
So naturally, they decided to check the neighbours. And they opened one of the neighbours' caravan to Carol's, and they opened the door and shone their torch in and saw something. It was the decomposing body of 54-year-old Carol Taggart.
Oh.
Her body was covered in dry blood and injuries. Her face was so bad that the staff at the morgue covered up her face so her family didn't have to see her when they came to identify her. So the way that she was actually identified was by a purple rose tattoo that she had on her wrist.
That's awful.
So an autopsy was done, and they figured out that her time of death was in the early hours of the 22nd of December. But before she was killed, Carol had been brutally beaten. Her cause of death was strangulation with her killer's bare hands, and police had a strong feeling that killer was Ross Taggart.
Yeah.
So 2 days after Carol's body was found, they went to arrest Ross. He was arrested and charged and kept in police custody for almost a year until November 2015 when his trial began. He pled not guilty.
Okay.
He came across as cocky throughout and he just thought he was going to get away with that, I think. And it was said that after Carol changing her will to just Ross getting everything, he wanted it now. Like, he wanted it now, and that's why he killed her. So that's why they think that he killed her, because he just was like that greedy and desperate to get everything from
awful.
her. So when Ross was called up for questioning, he was very unhelpful. And even the prosecution said that, you need to answer the questions better, but he just turned around and said, well, it's the best you're going to get. So he was very,
What a wanker.
Yeah, basically. So as Ross wasn't saying much, we don't actually know how the murder came about or any real details. So we don't know the sequence of events of the night Carol died.
So I was just wondering why they were at the caravan. Do we know why she was there?
We're gonna have a So police, they basically had to give their theory on what happened.
Right, okay.
So what I'm going to tell you now, it might not be 100% accurate.
So that's just what they've kind of...
But it's about, that's basically what the police theorised happened, and basically it's about as good as we're going to get.
Right, okay.
So this is what they think happened. So on the 21st of December, police believe that Carol and Ross had another huge argument, and they think that Carol had told Ross to get out. Move out of the house, just get out.
Yeah.
And basically Ross was having none of it. They think that he just got so mad that he started hitting Carol, and he just did it over and over, and like he basically couldn't control his rage any longer. And he hit her so hard that she passed out, and when her body fell to the floor, Ross thought he'd killed her.
Right.
He hadn't at this point.
Mm-hmm.
She'd only passed out. So Ross thought, shit, I better get rid of the body. So he ran upstairs, got loads of bed sheets, and he took them downstairs and wrapped up her body in them. He carried her, and he put her in the boot of her car and drove them to the caravan. Once he was there, he took Carol and dragged her inside, and he put her underneath the bed in the caravan. But Ross didn't know that Carol was still alive at this point. He still thinks he's killed her.
Yeah.
But she obviously comes to, totally freaks out, starts trying to get away, and Ross knows now that he's basically got to kill his mum for a second time, because he thought he's already killed her, so he's got to kill her for a second time. So that's when he's grabbed Carol, threw her on the bed, and then began to strangle her with his own bare hands. Finally, when he was sure that she was dead, he put her body back under the bed, and that's when he jumped in the car, messaged this woman, whose house he went to, and drove there.
The dating site woman.
Mm-hmm.
So after he's done that, he goes for a bit, for a booty call.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the next day, Ross abandoned his mum's car, and he went home for the first 2 days, pretended like nothing had happened.
Mm-hmm.
He obviously tried not to draw attention to himself when he, which he managed not too bad for the first couple of days. But when he heard the police were going to search the caravan, he went into panic mode. He somehow, we don't know how he's made his way there, because obviously doesn't have the car at this point, but he somehow made his way there in the early hours of Christmas Eve without anyone seeing him, knowing that he had to move Carol's body. He saw the door on the wooden foundations under the caravan and thought that would be the perfect place, and he knew that the neighbour's caravan, like, they used that as like a holiday home, so they weren't there.
So they wouldn't be there for a while.
So they knew that they weren't there. So that's when he decided to put Carol's body under the neighbours, and then he cleaned the caravan up. So that's what the police think happened.
Right.
Obviously.
Oh, God.
So anyway, Ross was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 18 years. So that's pretty much it. But the other real bad thing, which I think does definitely need to be changed, is that Ross is still the beneficiary of her will, even though he murdered his own mother. There's currently no law against that, so he is still going to
How is there not a law?
I know, but I think his family obviously want to change that law.
Surely they can contest that will, though.
I would think so, but currently there's no law against. So basically, even though he's killed his mum, he's still going to benefit. And, you know, as I said, I've seen a picture of the house. It's a nice house. They've got a caravan. You know, there's probably a bit of money in that, you know.
I'm confused as to how you can still benefit from somebody's will after you've killed them. How?
I don't think that should be allowed, personally.
No!
Like
I didn't think that was allowed. Because I was thinking, well, why, you know what you were saying, now you wanted that money now, and I'm thinking, does he not know that he's not going to get that money?
And the thing is, though, because of that, like, nobody's been allowed to go to Carol's house, because it's now Ross's house. So, like, all her stuff's, I mean, unless there's been any update, but all her stuff is still left as it was, because nobody has been allowed to go into that house since he's been in prison, because it's technically his.
No!
I know, like, how bad is that, though?
That is absolutely horrendous. That poor woman, well, like, should be turning on her grave knowing that the person who has killed her has got all her stuff.
And it's a shame, really, because, I mean, obviously, yes, the boys experienced a very tragic event with her dad dying, and I understand that. And I understand that Carol probably didn't want to add to that. But, you know, obviously her trying to be nice to them has ended up in her downfall.
Yeah. But she doesn't know.
No.
She's obviously done what she thought was best. She wanted to do the best for her kid.
Exactly. I mean, you know, as we were just talking about earlier, you know, parenting's not easy, and you know, you don't always get it right, and you know.
What did I say to you earlier? Parenting is the hardest job in the world, and there is no right or wrong way to do it. So she's just doing what she thought was right, and
same, and then maybe it wasn't initially, like, say, trying to make things easy for the boys because they were going through a lot, but obviously Ross just saw that as his meal ticket almost, and just, you know,
gives him an inch and they'll take a mile.
But bless her, she did obviously, you know, eventually see.
She was seeing through it.
Thing, but as I said, because she, you know, fought back, that did end up in, sadly, you know,
that's awful.
Senseless murder in my eyes, and all because
who kills their mum?
Well, exactly, because at the end of the day, I mean, she did everything for him, rightly or wrongly. She did everything for him, and
I'm sorry, but I've always said that I would rather have my parents than their money. You know what I mean? I would rather have my parents live forever than have any money that they might have that I would inherit.
Exactly, of course.
Yeah, exactly. Because like, you would rather have your parents here. Well, it's supposed to mean more, isn't it?
It should mean more than money.
But for money to mean more than your parents,
and it wasn't like he didn't have, in my eyes, an easiest life. I mean, he lived with his mum. I mean, he could have just got a job and stuck to a job and just lived life normally, you know.
He had an easy life.
His mum was still there for him. His mum probably would have still, you know, helped him out or, you know, done things with him. But he could have...
exactly. I mean, it's nobody's fault but his. You know, no matter what she did and how she handled the situation and how she brought him up, but then she's done nothing wrong. It's him that's in the wrong. I mean, basically, he has had an easy life. Yes, his dad died, which obviously is one of the worst things that you're going to go through. But he still had his mum, he still had siblings, he had a stepdad, you know, he could have worked through his grief. Obviously, he's still going to miss his dad no matter what.
Yeah, of course.
But...
And then as the older brother did. I mean, the older brother was a bit troublesome in his younger years.
And he grew out of it.
And, I mean, obviously, I'm assuming has went on to live a reasonable life. So, you know, it can be done. And I know that everybody's the same.
But losing a parent isn't an excuse or a reason for you to turn out like that and to murder your other parent. Like, you've already lost one parent. You know how that feels, so why would you...
Yeah. I mean, I must admit, I don't know if he necessarily intended to murder her, because obviously when they had the argument and he just lost control, he may not have set out to actually kill her at that point. But then he obviously thought he did, but then realising he didn't, he then made that decision to then kill her. So, I mean, you know... You'd
think you'd be like, oh my God, thank God I haven't killed her.
I've beaten her up really badly, so I'm still in trouble, but she's still alive. But then he probably thought, oh my God, I'm not going to get money or whatever, so he just thought, no, I'm still...
He's probably thinking, she's going to write me out of her will now.
Yeah, like, I've taken it too far, so I'm just going to have to...
I bet that's why he's done it.
Probably. Yeah.
That's horrendous.
So I do wonder, I mean, obviously, whether things will change in the time, by the time he gets out or whatever, but will he still have her house and all the will, the benefits of the will when he gets out of prison?
That's the most baffling thing about this, like how he is entitled to that. Like, that should be a law.
Yeah, oh, totally. That should be the loophole where, sorry, you're not entitled to that anymore because you've actually killed that person.
I really thought that was a law.
Well, according to...
How can you still get that?
That research, it's not.
No, that's not right at all. I hope his family fights for that and maybe gets a change in the law and maybe 100%. Contests the will and all that kind of stuff. Because, like, when was that, 2015 or 16, did you say? It was only a few years ago, so that... If they're doing stuff about it, it'll probably take years for it to happen.
I know. So there you go, there's my law episode.
I feel really upset now.
I'm sorry.
I do, like, you know how some cases hit you more than others? And I just can't imagine. Maybe it's because we have already lost a parent, like we've lost our dad, so to lose our mum as well would be awful. So when you know what it's like to lose a parent, how can you...
And
do that?
Neither of us have sponged off our mother, have we? I mean, she should always be there to help us if we need her, but I certainly haven't relied on her or even thought about... I wouldn't even think about money or being in her will. I'm like, I want my mum. I don't...
Yeah, I'm not... Exactly. I'm not interested in anything that she's got.
That's a natural part of life eventually, but I'm not interested in that right now. Like, I'd rather my mum lived another 10, 20 years than, you know... You
need to grow up and not live off your parents. Our mother flipping told us, she told me anyway at 16, that was it, like, you're not my responsibility anymore.
I shouldn't tell me that.
Oh well, I was a different child to what you were. Okay. But yeah, I wasn't her responsibility anymore. Yeah, I still lived in her house and all the rest of it, but...
we both know she's always there if we need help with anything, but then, we haven't really had to need that from our mum. We just enjoy her as her.
Exactly. Like, we've never thought of her of anything as other than our mum, whereas he has obviously looked to her as his way of...
meal ticket.
Meal ticket. That's exactly what they were.
Like an easy life, doesn't have to get on his backside.
What an absolute piece of garbage.
A monster, as he was described.
A monster, yeah. So, thank you to everybody for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. Bye.
If you'd like to get in contact with us or follow us on our social media, we are on Instagram and Twitter at crime_divers_pod. You can email us at crime_divers_pod@outlook.com. We're on YouTube, and that's Crime Divers Podcast, and TikTok is also Crime Divers Podcast. If you would like to financially support the show, you could go to www.buymeacoffee.com/crimedivers and make a one-off donation. Our Patreon is patreon.com/crimedivers. We have 3 tiers, which is £1, £3 or £5, and you get bonus episodes, early access to episodes, and ad-free episodes.
And if you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe, rate and review.